Sarah Woodard is a local authoress that has published 19 books and is on her way to many more. Several have earned her the Purple Dragonfly Book Award. Changing the world one book and one reader at a time via Skype. Let's meet Sarah Woodard.
My name is Sarah Woodard, and I am a children's author. Primarily, I do also write some poetry and some spiritual self-help. So my books are all fiction, but they are sort of, a friend of mine said they have an eco-activist bent, and I kind of liked that. So I'm going to steal her words. They definitely are more about creating a positive change in this world and making more people like Greta Thunberg come into play, and inspiring the younger generation to step up. You know, we've done a pretty poor job, my generation and before. We've done a pretty poor job. I own that. I'm a piece of that too, and I do my best. But as a generation, we've done a pretty poor job of caring for this earth that we've been given. And this work that I do, I can't even claim it as mine, because it's really a team effort. And when I say a team effort, I mean my earthly team, which is my illustrator and my editor. But I also work with spirit. And I don't use words like God or Jesus, because those can be off-putting to people. So I work with spirit. I work with the universe, and I bring forth those messages that I am being told need to be heard. And it's very much like how I imagine people must think of things like automatic writing or something like that. I literally will just get inspired by something. I'll see something on social media and start crying or whatever. And I'll be like, is there a book there? And if there is, the book shows up. And I have very little to do with it other than recording it and sending it to my illustrator, who has a very similar process of, he reads the book and he will sit and go, okay, show me the pictures. And the pictures show up. So he was the right person to work with. And so they're meant to be a catalyst, but they're also meant to be thought-provoking and positive for the most part. Some are more sad, but for the most part, very positive. Obviously, some topics are maybe a little too mature for the younger kids. But I also think that much like The Petite Prince, where you could read that book as a kid and be like, wow, that was a fun book. And then you read it as an adult and you get something much deeper out of it. I feel like these are in that same vein, where if mom and dad are sitting and reading with their kid, or whoever is sitting and reading with the child, they're going to take something different away from it than maybe the kid does. I think I sort of first understood that I wanted to write when I was in the 4th grade. We had that typical essay you have to write of what do you want to be when you grow up. And I wrote all about how I wanted to be a writer. There's a little funny anecdote here in that back then we didn't have computers, because I'm older than I look. So we didn't have computers then. And we had to handwrite in cursive our essays. And in the 4th grade was when we transitioned from pencils to pen. And so I worked really hard on my penmanship and earned my pen. And so I cursive in pen wrote this entire essay. And in this essay, I talk about how as a writer, you have to spell correctly and use grammar correctly. And I must use the word correctly 15 times in this short little essay. And every single time I spelled it wrong. But it was one of those things where when you're in high school and you're applying for colleges and stuff, and you say, well, I want to be a writer, people look at you and go, like a journalist. And I knew I didn't want to be a journalist. I wanted nothing to do with that. You're a high school kid, and you're kind of at that point ingrained in do what you're told. And the adults are trying to do what's best for you, and you should just listen to them. And so I ultimately went to college and majored in high school special ed, which was great and wonderful. And I certainly learned a lot, including the fact that that was not the right career path for me. And it took a while, a lot of twists and turns and just working in jobs just to, make a living that I didn't really love, to bring me back to this place. My favorite book when I was growing up was Mike Mulligan and his Steam Shovel, which is still very popular today. It's a Newbery winner. If you haven't read it, check it out. I will say that this is one of those books that probably the first book I could read on my own. And it was one of those books that when I read it as a kid, it was just a cute little story about Mike Mulligan and his steam shovel and how they went from town to town and she could dig really fast and work harder than all the other steam shovels and da-da-da-da-da. And at the end, steam shovels are obsolete. And they repurpose her to be the furnace in the basement of the last building that she dug the basement for. And it's this really sweet story. And that's all it was as a kid. When I reread it as an adult, it became so much more. Like, it became about still having value, even though not everyone views you the same way, right? It became something much bigger. And I feel like that gets woven in with my work, not by me. And so that somehow became important along the line. And also Richard Scarry, his work is definitely not as layered like that, but I just loved his books. They were fun, and they still are. And the other thing with him is, and this is a little bit of a goal that I have that may sound a little crazy to some people, but I know it can be done. He wrote and published 300 books in his lifetime. I would like to do the same. So, like I said, my writing process is really about tapping into what spirit is giving me. That's hard to do in like a coffee shop or somewhere distracting like that. So I have like a meditation space where I can go and sit. My laptop is usually just like right near my couch or right nearby. So if I get hit with something, I can just grab it and start writing. A lot of times I will be quote unquote minding my own business and I'll just get whacked with it. The other day I was in the kitchen making some food and I was waiting for water to boil or something. And I was looking out the window. I abut the north end of Greeley Park. And so I was looking out my window at the trees and just, hanging out in my kitchen. And I got literally like whacked upside the head with a story. And I was like, okay, turned the water off, went in the other room, grabbed my laptop and sat down and wrote the book. I was like, can I eat now? Thank you. They just happen. I have a big picture window in the room where my meditation space is. So I'll sit there sometimes. And I was watching the other day and there was a rabbit that went, was hanging out, had his meal, whatever, left. And then I'm still watching, still looking, just observing the world, basically, just being still to, make that space for things to come through. And the rabbit comes whipping through. They can get up to 45 miles an hour. And I'm telling you, this rabbit was going 45 miles an hour, whipping through. And I'm like, oh my God, be careful. Don't run across the street. Be careful, bunny rabbit. And then I look back the other direction to see what had this rabbit like freaking out. And there was a fox, and the fox was just standing there, kind of looked up, kind of like, it was almost like he shrugged his shoulders and went back in the woods. He's like, nah, I'm not chasing anymore. I give up. And that became a book. So it just comes wherever it comes, My editor is my friend, Abby Rosemarin, who's also an author in her own right, but not for children. And she's actually the one who called me called my books the eco-activist bent. She's also very spiritually connected, which is kind of vital given how these books come into being. And she will go through it and make, comments, changes. Writers, we all have like our one mistake that we make every time. And we know we make it every time. And we always try to do the opposite thing that we think we're supposed to do so that we don't make it and we continue to make it anyway. And mine is with dialogue, I continue to screw up the punctuation in dialogue. I don't know why. And so so whenever there's dialogue, I'm like, she's going to edit that. There's going to be corrections. And when there's not, I'm surprised. But she'll also edit for things like, rhythm, or word choice or things like that. And then that kind of goes into the queue because right now I usually am gifted about 3 or 4 books every month. My illustrator is Carlos Lopez. He actually lives in Venezuela, so we've never met in person. But through the magic of the internet, we were able to connect and work together to do this. My illustrator is amazing and can somehow do 2 books a month, basically. Thereabouts. These are all sort of approximate numbers. But so there's a backlog, and so it just kind of goes into the queue in the backlog. There's also an even larger backlog because, like I said, my illustrator is in Venezuela. And so my first book came out, and then there was a year period where nothing happened except me writing and her editing because he was MIA. Turns out the entire country was without power for like 6 to 9 months of that year. That's why I couldn't find him. So we should be very thankful we have power every day when we wake up, and we have internet every day when we wake up. Once I was able to find him again, we've been able to kind of just conveyor belt it. But there's a big backlog, so it just kind of goes in that queue. And then basically what happens is he will sketch out, the main character, and we'll go back and forth to refine the character. And then he just jumps in and he sends me usually it's 2 pages a day that he'll send me. And usually I don't have any changes to make because, like I said, he's tapping into that same source that I am. So usually there isn't any. Occasionally there is. Particularly, like, I just wrote one about the Old Man of the Mountain and the Watcher. And he's never seen them in person. I mean, I sent him pictures and stuff, but because he's never experienced it, there was things I had to tweak because he has no idea. But usually if it's just imaginary, completely imaginary, I have nothing to change. And then once he, reaches the end, he sends me the print ready files, and I do my thing as far as getting it into Kindle and getting it onto paperback on Amazon. And I send him the next book and we just keep going. The marketing. I mean, I obviously hope that it changes the world in a positive way. I mean, my motto is changing the world one book and one reader at a time, right? But for me, just the creation process is so much fun. And it feels really empowering, which is part of why it's fun. It's about having a voice. This all really started, I had written a book or 2, but this all really started, I'm vegan, which is an important part of this story. And I'm not saying everyone in the world has to be, although I think it would be a nicer place if we were. But I was talking to a friend of mine who actually lives in Florida now. And she's also vegan. And I was saying to her, I'm like, Andrea, I need to have a voice in this community, meaning the vegan community. I can't just sit here anymore and watch this world destroying itself and hurting animals and hurting each other. And I was like on a tear about needing to have this voice. And she says, well, Sarah, you know what you have to do. You have to put it out to spirit to give you that voice and it will happen. And I'm like, you're right. And she was. And very quickly after that, these books just started happening. And this is a little bit of a sidetrack, but I feel like this is an important story. My name is Sarah with an H on the end, as you have seen. But on my birth certificate, there was no H. For whatever reason, they just didn't put it on. I don't know. Parents are parents. So, but my whole kind of cognizant life, I was like, there needs to be an H. There needs to be an H. So, and I was raised in a Jewish family, and I did the whole bat mitzvah thing and all of that. So my Torah portion for my bat mitzvah was a piece called Lech Lecha, I think. I might not be pronouncing that right. Lech Lecha, something like that. Find a rabbi, they can tell you. Basically, that story is about when God says to Abraham and Sarah, who her name was Sarai at that point, they hadn't changed, and he was Abram, not Abraham, says, you need, go out into this world. I'm making a covenant with you that if you go out into this world and you trust me, I will make you a father of a great nation. Go and trust this covenant. And so they go. They bow down before God and they go. And then they come back. And because God tells them they can come back. And at that point, that's when Sarah becomes fertile and they change the H on her last name and on her first name, I mean. And and Abram becomes Abraham. Okay. Now, in Hebrew, that H is Achai, which is life, which means life. So that was pretty cool and important. And that was my Torah portion, was that story. On the day of my bat mitzvah, they legally changed my name to have the H on the end. So that was a kind of cool parallel. But where this really gets interesting and where I get really emotional is there is a song by Debbie Friedman, also called Lech Lecha, about this particular Torah portion. And I forget all of the words. You can find it on YouTube. But it's something about, I will make your name great. You will be a blessing. And I felt like when I had that whole rant with my friend Andrea and said, I need a voice. I need this, it was like, Spirit was like, yes, I've been waiting to give it to you. This is how you are a blessing. Here are the words. Here are the books. Get ready. And so it does all connect back, but I know it was sort of a bit of a segue there. So, but yeah, so that for me, that's what it's about is not just a voice for me, but it's a voice for nature. It's a voice for animals. It's the voice for minorities and other, not so well recognized classes of citizens. And anybody that doesn't really have a voice, like that's what it's about for me, is giving those people, plants, animals, whatever it is, a voice. And I think part of that too is, you wouldn't know it now, but I was very shy as a child. I didn't even want to talk to my parents if we were in public, like painfully shy. So I didn't really have my own voice then, but I would talk to animals and I would talk to plants and I would talk to rocks very happily all day long, have wonderful conversations. And they were my friends. And I feel like it's sort of a way of, I'm being granted this opportunity to give back to those plants and animals that were, and rocks and everything else that were my friends when I didn't have my own voice, So I recognize that I am in the minority of those who are going to say this. And I am truly sympathetic to everything that everyone is going through because of this pandemic. It's a scary place right now. And I fully recognize that. That being said, I've been really, really blessed. I was laid off for a little while, but it was during that time when the federal government actually stepped up and did their jobs, and we were getting that extra money. And Sununu was wonderful and let self-employed people get unemployment, because my day job is also self-employed. And so I was really blessed. It didn't affect my income and thus not my feeling of safety. So I just kept doing what I do. And if anything, it's almost been like a springboard for me because I wasn't working. I had nothing but time to sit with spirit and say, okay, how do we do this? How do we make this happen? Where, what should I be doing? Where should I be poking at? I half joked about how marketing is the worst part, because it really is, but even sat with spirit and was able to say, what should I post on social media? How should I post on social media? What should I tweak? What should I not tweak? And it really gifted me that time because I wasn't working, ideally I would love for the books to be my job, but we're not there yet. Someday. But I was watching something on YouTube that was actually like a Harvard panel, and they were talking about climate and spirituality, and just, it was very much my sort of a thing. And I was watching it, and one of them said something about, she was in so much pain about something that was going on in the world. She was in tears, and she asked a Native American leader that she was close to, which, being a trained shaman, I was like, yes, what did he say? And he said, hold on to this, because that's the place you write from. This pain is where you write from. That's how you heal it. You write from this pain. And it's true. Almost all of my books have come from me being in tears about something. Not necessarily even personal to me, but something that's out in the world that I'm just like, but that's so horrible, or that's so beautiful, and makes me cry. That's where you write from. And so, as much as the pandemic has been very scary and very terrible for many, many people, that pain, that's where the creativity is. There's a difference between I want to be a writer and I'm a published author. And the difference is the person who wants to be a writer thinks that there's some magic wand that has to happen before they actually sit down with pen and paper or computer and whatever word processing program of their choice and writes. If you want to be a writer, write. It doesn't have to be good the first time, the second time, or the 27th time. I'm a huge Agatha Christie fan myself, and I just recently finished collecting all 84 of her novels and short story collections. And my whole goal, I've been collecting for decades, and my goal was, when I got them all, I wanted to read them in order, in the order that they were published. And in doing that, I discovered that it's not till about her 6th or 8th book that she really hits her stride of kind of what I remember them being. Now, they're still great to read, those early on ones. They're still great books, or they would not have been published. But it took her that long to kind of find that groove. And for me, like my first 6 or so books, they're great. They're worth reading, or they wouldn't have been published either. But it wasn't till about my 6th book when I hit that groove. You don't have to hit your groove out of the gate. It's not a race. Sit down and write. Sit down and write. You can delete, you can throw things away. It's okay. To find my books, which are available as paperback and Kindle, go to amazon.com/author/Sarah Woodard.
Thank you for joining our virtual Art Week. City Arts Nashua appreciates the support of our sponsors and you, our viewers. Please continue to support our local artists and our musicians and theater groups. For more information on arts in Nashua, please visit cityartsnashua.org.